The first call cut through the winter dark a few minutes after 9, a man's voice fighting static on VHF channel 16. Mayday, taking water, position. The numbers broke apart in the hiss, then a burst of wind drowned the rest. Along a small harbor on Norway's west coast, the volunteer on duty in the radio hut wrote what she thought she heard, repeated it back with a steady voice, and logged the time. The barometer had fallen all afternoon. Out beyond the skerries, the westerly was pushing hard, and the fjord mouth was black water combed white. At the Joint Rescue Coordination Center, the duty officer marked the grid square on the wall chart and started the drill that begins every time a voice says the word that overrides doubt. Launch what can launch. Listen everywhere. Triangulate. The rescue machine moved the way it always does there, without show. A pair of orange suits came off hooks in a boathouse. A rescue boat crew spun a prop to feel the oil. A Coast Guard cutter turned down sea and began shouldering into weather. At a nearby air station, a helicopter crew started their checks, tie-downs half off before the formal order arrived. Onshore, 100 private radios clicked louder. Fishermen at kitchen tables, truckers parked up for the night, anyone who keeps Channel 16 as background to winter. They all leaned closer to the speaker and scribbled half positions on whatever paper was at hand. Envelopes, fuel receipts, the corner of a newspaper. A minute later, the voice came again, closer and more clipped. New numbers, a breath, a pump hammering in the background, and then lights to port before the transmission sheared away. The second position did not agree with the first. The operator at a coastal traffic station said their radar saw nothing that matched within either box. But in 1994, not every hull carried a transponder, radar disappears behind rock, and winter makes liars of instruments that work fine in July. Direction finding is the first tool after hope. The coordination center asked listening posts to swing their loops and report bearings. Pencil lines crossed on a paper chart beneath a mug, and a rough triangle grew that pointed into the throat of a deep sound, where steep walls carry wind like a horn. The Coast Guard cutter, bow rising, falling, rising, reported the distress carrier as strong and variable. The helicopter clawed into the weather anyway. From the cabin, a rescue swimmer counted his harness by touch, while the searchlight painted the sea in quick snapshots. White, black, white, nothing. For an hour the search moved as winter searches move along that coast, in expanding squares, in doglegs against cliff faces, in passes down the inside water where a small boat might be running dark. Flares were reported twice. Both times they proved to be light bouncing on low cloud. A life ring blinked its last battery out on a swell. When the helicopter dipped to it, it was stamped with the name of a vessel that had sunk years earlier and drifted back into service as a decoy for worry. On the cutter's echo sounder, a herring shoal drifted like a pale cloud down a slope that fell away as if someone had taken a shovel to the seabed. After midnight, the channel fell quiet. The calls had stopped as suddenly as they began. The boats ran their pattern another hour for luck. The helicopter flew one more leg and turned for fuel. The volunteer closed the logbook and set a thermos by the radio in case the voice returned. At the coordination center, the incident board stayed open, its last line not terminated, but pending. 2 nights later, the voice was back. Same cadence, same rough panic pressed flat by discipline. The numbers were new and disagreeing again, one set inside the skerries, one far out. The bearings this time pointed to the narrow water between islands where the depth soundings go from tens of meters to hundreds in one tight bend. Listening posts reported signal strength in an order that made no sense. Strongest to the southeast, when it should have been strongest to the northwest. The cutter altered course again. The helicopter could not launch, ceiling too low, spray thrown skyward by peak gusts. On the medium-frequency distress channel, The old 2182 kilohertz. Another fragment arrived in English, the way a coastal officer will change languages when he wants every ear. The fragment gave a position near a famous cape, miles wrong by either bearing. By morning, the only things in hand were times, bearings, and a series of more precise questions. Could atmospheric ducting bend VHF so a voice spoke from farther than the map allowed? Yes. In winter, temperature inversions can make strange paths. Could a hoaxer move a portable set in weather like this, in and out of the skerries, sinking his lies to direction-finding beams, risking his life for the pleasure of hearing engines start? Possible, but mad. If a fishing boat were truly in trouble, where was anything that floats? Even a crate of bait would have found a shore by now. The search controllers kept lining up ships and aircraft against the most likely box and waited for the next hiss. It came, irregular and unsettling, through November into December. Some nights, nothing. Some nights, 3 calls an hour. Sometimes the voice was almost calm, clipped and professional. Sometimes the panic leaked, and you could hear water slapping near the microphone, the sound of a pump laboring. Each time the triangles resolved into the same corridor, a deep approach to a fjord that drops like a shaft and carries current as if to hide something. Twice a day, the Coast Guard flew daylight lines along rock and beach looking for scrap, foam, tar, wood, anything that was not the sea itself. Nothing. The local rescue boat ran night after night, the coxswain logging even the things he could not bring himself to say aloud. A thump under the keel like a moving log in a sea with no logs, a smear on radar that wandered and then faded, a light that was there and then wasn't. Someone made the call to the Navy. Along that coast, cables have long listened to the traffic of steel. The Cold War had ended on paper, but the sea keeps its habits. A headquarters officer said, as they say, that nothing they could share would help the search. That later, when the winter's binder was closed, some low notes were indeed logged. Transient narrowband energy at depth at times that matched distress, consistent with a large propulsor. No classification. Nothing you could point at and sign your name under. By January, the newspapers had a shape for the story. Phantom SOS Calls, no wreck, radar hints of something moving below. The rescue service put out what it could without feeding the parts that were only radio ghosts. Yes, repeated distress. Yes, searches. No, debris. No, names on any missing list that matched those dates and waters. In harbors, people who know wind and steel took sides the way people do when the sea offers a riddle. Some said prank, some said radio tricks, some said something on the bottom that had no business so close to shore. Most said nothing and kept listening. Inside the case file, the human detail thickened. The volunteer in the radio hut began bringing a blanket to the night shift because standing up after an hour in the cold made her legs shake. A teenager took to lingering at the boathouse because watching grown men turn a hull into weather taught him more about courage than school had so far managed. A helicopter crewman wrote home and crossed out everything that might worry his mother and, in crossing it out, understood why his hands trembled on off nights. The coordination center taped a map edge that kept tearing because someone's coffee mug always found that place on nights like these. And then, as winter softened, the calls thinned. One last fragment, then silence. The binder at the rescue center took its closing paragraph. Multiple distress calls received over several weeks. Widespread direction finding. Searches by Coast Guard, Rescue Society, and local vessels. No debris or survivors found. Probable combination of atmospheric propagation and unidentified source. Case held open pending new information. The Navy sent no updated note. Spring washed the edges off the mystery without erasing any part the people who had gone looking would remember. Tell it straight, and the story shrinks to its measurable bones. Voices on 2 bands, bearings on paper, Search tracks plotted and replotted, nothing to recover. But the human contract behind the word Mayday does not shrink. You answer because that is the kind of coast you want to live on, because once you go to sea, you owe the sea's people your ears and your engine. If there was a wreck, it lies in cold water along a wall that drops out of sounding, the kind of place that returns only silence when you ask it questions. If there was no wreck, then winter itself built a ghost from ducts and skip and timing, and perhaps something steel and secret grazed the doorway of the fjord and moved on without ever lifting a periscope. Either way, the habit remains. Boots stand by the bed, pointed the right way. A pencil waits next to the radio. On nights when the wind runs the channel like a blade, people who know the difference between rumor and a call for help still turn the volume up and listen. And if the hiss sharpens into words, Mayday, Mayday, they write the numbers clean, repeat them back, and go. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.